When we bought our new home about 13 months ago, I wasn't expecting to have built quite such a nice vegetable garden within the first year. Today, let's do a veg garden tour. It's early evening and the sun is just moving around behind the polytunnel, so already most of the garden is in shade. But here we go, bed number 1. So we've got a row of Swiss chard, and there in fact are still a few of the broad beans, that's fava beans, in here because I didn't lift them out, I cut them off, and a couple of them are still trying to produce beans. There's some cosmos in here to continue to feed the bees and attract other pollinators. And then in the middle is, I'm fairly sure that these are cabbages. I think they are Filderkraut, which is a pointed cabbage, and it's one that I really like. Just looking at the leaves, looking at how the centre of them are starting to become slightly conical shaped and wrapping leaves around each other. So I think those are cabbages. And then on that side is a double row of leeks, and I'll be harvesting those throughout the winter. Bed number 2 has French beans in it, so these are dwarf or bush beans, and there are 3 varieties: purple teepee, a green one whose name I can't remember, and a yellow one which I think is Sonesta. Anyway, we have now started harvesting these beans. Last weekend we had a meal that was 100% homegrown food, so I'm really pleased to be getting back to that stage. In the front there is some thyme which is flowering. It's looking very pretty and the bees are loving it. In the centre here is some dill. Now this is also going to seed, but I'm not in the least bit worried about it. I've sown some more, that will come up through, and in the meantime these wonderful flowers, oh, they're really pretty. And then on the side here there are some cosmos, calendula. This cosmos is really interesting. It's got very crinkly petals, which is a nice one. And then over here on bed 3, well, there's just masses going on. There are 2 courgettes. They are Genovese, and they are being prolific actually. The leaves don't look fabulous. They are starting to get a bit tatty. I noticed a couple are starting to get powdery mildew, so I've removed those, put them in the compost heap. But they are also, they're kind of climbing. So they're doing this very long trail, and this one was starting to go across the bed that way, and I've kind of pulled it round and put a stake in the ground to kind of guide it in this direction. But that's got masses of baby courgettes coming. And again, this bed is filled with cosmos, Ami and agastache, and it's looking really lovely. And the other thing in this corner is there are a couple of biennials. There's some foxgloves, which I think is an apricot foxglove, and there's also some honesty, which is possibly lunaria. Tucked away deep down in amongst there is an acer, and it's a very pretty, very dark purpley red leafed acer, and I want this to eventually fill this space. Probably going to be many years before it gets big enough to cast much shadow here, so I'm very happy to have that in there. And there are also a few perennial flowers which over the autumn or the winter, possibly next spring, I will move down to the flower garden. And here in bed 4, well, it looks at the moment like it's mostly flowers, but it's not. There are big clumps of Welsh onions down both sides. I hadn't grown these before, and I'm really, really pleased with them. Super excited. So I sowed these seeds at the beginning of October. I really didn't look after them terribly well, and they were not potted on probably as quickly as they needed to be. But anyway, once I got them into this bed, they have grown away very nicely. So you harvest these either just by cutting the leaves, or you can dig up the bulbs, use as many of the bulb sections that you want, and then replant a whole section. And I don't mean half a bulb. If there'll be several bulbs, and you can replant one, or you could just sow some more from seed. I'm so impressed with these that I'm actually going to grow some more and possibly have a whole bed of Welsh onions, and I'm going to think really carefully about whether I want to grow onions from seeds and sets to grow big bulb onions or not, because it might be that I will just stick with these. And then over here is a clump of pink bergamot, monarda, bee balm. It's got lots of different names. That's really suffering with powdery mildew. It's obviously getting dry at the roots and not being able to take up enough nutrients, so I need to keep an eye on that, and I will water it some more. I might give it a feed as well. In fact, everything in this bed is starting to look rather dry. And in here, this rather funky flower is a Babington leek. This is a perennial leek, and this is one of the ways it reproduces. So it produces bulbils, and you can grow these on, and they'll also produce them around the bulb, and that will get larger each year. So I'm enjoying seeing how that grows, and I will plant those bulbils before too long. At this end, we've got lettuce. It's a Salanova lettuce. Oh, it's got a big slug in it, so let's remove that. And a couple of big slugs in it, yuck. So it's a it's a Salanova lettuce. It is cut and come again, so you pick from around the outside of it. It's got this lovely crinkly leaf. I really like it. You don't need terribly many of these to see you through quite a long season. And there's some sweet Sicily here, 2 huge nasturtium plants with large leaves and prolific flowering, which I'm very pleased about. There are these lupins in the middle here. I put these in this bed to put them somewhere for them to grow on. They will be moved down to the flower field before next spring. I keep saying I'm going to do it any minute now, and then they produce a whole load more flowers, and I think, well, I'm going to wait until they've finished flowering before I move them. And also we keep having some very, very warm weather, so I might just wait until it cools down and it's autumn and this is dying back and move them then. In this metal raised bed, I've got some asparagus. I'm very pleased to say that I think, fingers crossed, all the asparagus I've planted has survived. And this bed is filled with hugelkultur style, with big logs at the bottom, smaller logs and then twigs, packed out with lots of wood. And then there's a layer of sheep's fleece. So when our sheep were shorn, we put the fleeces in here. I've still got some more in bags over there to use elsewhere. Anyway, I've got two beds of asparagus. There will be a third, so I've still got a bucket of asparagus waiting to go in. And again, I've put some of the cosmos in here, and this is a white borage. And I'm growing lots of white borage as well as the blue one. I love it. Its little flowers look fabulous if you freeze them in an ice cube, and then when you use the ice cube in your drink, you can see this little flower suspended in it. They're great for adding to salads. You need to get rid of the green bit on the back. Just use the flower, and if you can, remove the centre bit. So actually all you're using is just the petals. Bed number 5 has had potatoes in it. So at the front end there are 3 calendula, and then there were various different varieties of potatoes in here. And rather than harvesting them all at once, I'm just lifting one plant at a time as we need potatoes in the kitchen. In the corner here I've put in a squash plant. The variety is baked potato. And as I clear this bed, I'm going to put some used duck bedding on it to help build the soil, and then I can get my next crop into here. Bed number 6, it's another polyculture. Here I've got some yak on. This won't be ready to harvest until late November, early December. I need to wait until all the leaves have been caught by the frost and turned black and started to die back, and at that point I will lift it. I've got a rosemary in the front there. Well, that's going to live there for a very long time. There's some parsley at the front, some echinacea. There's a whole group of flowers in here that again will get moved down to the flower field when that's ready. Here I've got some red curly kale. It's a lovely one actually. I don't know the variety. I think on the seed packet I've just written red curly kale, but it's very nice. It's got this beautiful purple ribbing down the centre of it, very dark, scrunched up curly leaves, and luckily hasn't been too badly attacked by cabbage white butterfly yet. No, they are unprotected, and like all the brassicas here, they are susceptible to cabbage white butterfly and cabbage moth laying their eggs on them. I do have an area in the food forest which I've created, covered, and I've put netting over that, and the reason I'm laughing is the plants that I put in it already had cabbage white eggs on them, so there are caterpillars on those plants, so I'm having to do a daily go through and try and dispose of those. The cabbages, kales, sprouts and everything else in the brassica family that I've got growing in this garden are sacrifice plants. They're here to help support the butterfly population, because whilst most people go, we don't want them, actually I really do. We've got a very healthy bat population here, and one of the things that bats eat are butterflies and moths, so I want to encourage those butterflies and moths to help support that bat population. We've also got hedgehogs in the area, and I know that they eat them as well. Now unfortunately hedgehogs can't actually get into this garden because we've had to fence it to make it rabbit proof, but there are hedgehogs living further down, and the butterflies aren't just going to be here, they'll be flitting around down there too. And then at this end there is some more bergamot there. You'll see there's a very similar pattern right across this veg garden. There are herbs, flowers and vegetables mixed in every bed. Down here there is a perennial geranium. I'm growing it here. It's the only one of these that I've got. It's got a very pretty variegated leaf. I want to divide it in the autumn so I have lots of plants. And then in the corner here there is some skirret. It's sending up these very beautiful little white flowers at the moment. Very happy with that skirret. It's looking really good, and I will be dividing that and growing probably best part of a bed of skirret next year. And then behind me here, this bed almost echoes bed number 6. So 6 and 7 are kind of a mirror image of each other in some ways. So there's some more skirret here. There's plenty of parsley here. This is flat leaf parsley, and on that bed it's a curly leaf parsley, and then another of these very lovely kales. There is a peony in each bed, and bits and pieces that are different here is this is a variegated de Benton's kale. That's doing very well. I'm going to take yet more cuttings of that to grow in the food forest. Down here is a nepeta, it's a catmint or catnip. There's some sedum, and then much to my delight in this corner is a tithonia. It's doing really well. That's a Mexican sunflower. It's this beautiful bright orange plant. It should get really big. It's not seeming to get very big here, so I suspect it's either too crowded or it's not liking the soil mix in this bed. Having just said all of our brassicas are out in the open and are sacrifice plants, this bed is netted. These are red cabbage. It's a variety called Red Acre, and then in the middle are some, well, it's very obviously calabrese. I thought I had put in purple sprouting broccoli. I've got a lot of this going on this year. I've got an awful lot of plants that I seem to have mislabelled. I'm not sure that we're going to have very much purple sprouting broccoli next spring, and because of that I've just ordered some plants online, some field grown plants They should be here this week. I will get them into the food forest to grow, so we can be sure we do have some purple sprouting broccoli. But in the meantime, we're very definitely going to be having some cabbages. These are looking good, and the calabrese is also not looking bad. At this end are the last few of the onions waiting to be harvested. These have become whoppers. Some of these are really big, and I'm very pleased with them. And again, at the corners here are some calendula. I need to come through and deadhead these. I've tried to be really good about deadheading flowers this year. But the ones under netting are not so easy just to walk past and snap off. Here in bed number 9, yet another polyculture. It's had strawberries in it. We've harvested those. They're now sending out lots of runners, creating new plants. There's a couple of very healthy looking stinging nettles in here, which I don't actually want in here, so I need to remove those. At this end, I've also got in 4 Savoy cabbage, and that's a variety called Virtus. However, those have succumbed to the caterpillars. I'm obviously not getting out here fast enough or often enough, so I'm just going to have to hope that they'll grow well enough and that the caterpillars don't actually decimate them. Again, some broccoli that I wasn't expecting to be broccoli. And then this is a bronze fennel. It's in flower. We've had alternately very, very hot days and very, very dry spells, and then days and days and days of rain. Well, we've woken up to another morning of rain. Everything looks very lush and green here. So the ground is going from parched to very sodden and back to parched again, because we're on a hill and because I've put in an awful lot of drainage to take the water off the land during the winter, because we're wet for more months than we're dry. It is drying out really quickly, and what I need to do to improve the soil is to add more organic matter. So that's going to be my key focus this winter, is to get more organic matter into these beds. Around here there's a little squash plant. I'm saying it's little because it hasn't grown very much yet. Hopefully it will have one of those lovely curled fruits. I've got 2 different bergamot here, the Monards at Bee Balm. In fact, there's 3. So there's a purple, a red and a pink. They are all struggling with the lack of moisture or the very damp conditions. There's quite a lot of sign of powdery mildew. I'm not terribly worried about it. The plants should be fine. And in the centre here, I've taken out the plants that were calabrese because we've harvested those, and I have now put in what is very definitely Asturian tree cabbage, so they will be in there for quite some time. Bed number 10 has got mostly flowers in it, all of which are waiting for the autumn to be moved, but there are also some food plants in here. So this is fennel. This is a Florence fennel, and I have failed yet again to grow Florence fennel without it bolting and going to seed. So it has produced flowers. I'm just enjoying it for what it is. It's a very beautiful plant, and the leaves have a wonderful aniseed fragrance. Can be used in cooking. Along the front there are a few more leeks. Now these ones haven't been transplanted yet. They will get transplanted in the next week or so into their permanent growing spaces. But the reason that I haven't moved those is that when I put all the young plants in this bed to grow on, I only transplanted half into bed number 1, gave them lots of space to grow. These ones have effectively had their growth stunted, which means that when I now transplant them, they will start growing, but I can harvest them that much later than the ones over there. So I'm helping to kind of stagger the harvest of those. We don't use a huge number of leeks. I would if I could, but Mr. J is not as keen on leeks as me, so we don't use a huge number. So probably what we've got over there will be adequate for most of the winter, and then as we head into the hungry gap, I'll start using those. In the gaps between plants, I've recently sown some carrots and some beetroots, so hopefully those will put in an appearance very soon. And then in bed number 11, there is another purple kale. There's quite a lot of chard. There's beetroot coming through. I sowed this a while ago at the same time as I sowed some in the polytunnel. Well, the beetroot in the polytunnel is almost ready to harvest, so I can use that, and then afterwards I'll have this. So I'm trying to do quite a lot of staggering of harvesting, staggering of being able to use the food fresh, and just kind of pacing myself in terms of those harvests. And then across the back here we've got some of the blue borage, again still very lovely in salads and in drinks. I've got some dahlias because I love them, and I've got this, which is a tobacco plant. I can't remember what its proper name is, but what it's going to do over the next few weeks is to send up a tall white flower that's fragrant in the evening, and it's very, very lovely. I've grown this for about the last 4 years. I do love it. It grows from seed really well. And then at the back here, bed number 12, is carrots and parsnips. 3 different types of carrots in here. At the front, where the soil is quite shallow, there's a red core Chantonnay, then there's an Amsterdam, then there is Autumn King. Gosh, I couldn't remember its name then. And then the parsnips. Now, I'm actually making this bed work really hard because in front of the carrots I've got some chives, and between the rows of carrots I've got some Canterbury bells. So there's a lot going on in this bed. I got a bit overexcited with how much I thought I could plant in it, and I think maybe next year I wouldn't put in quite so much all into one space. These are 2 of my newest beds. On this side there is somewhere in there are some globe artichokes, agastache, lots of nasturtiums, and again another of those tobacco plants. There are 3 of the I can't see them at all but there are 3 of the globe artichokes in there. They'll come up through. The nasturtiums are annuals, and I won't grow any in there next year. The agastache will grow as a perennial if it's protected, so I'm going to want to protect the crowns of those artichokes, so I'll protect the agastache as well. And then in this bed, which is probably the newest of the beds, everything is really struggling through a lack of water. But I've transplanted things into here from other places, and yeah, they're struggling. So there's a borage and some parsley, and yet another of the tobacco plants, some more agastache. And there's a little strawberry here, some verbascum, and there are 2 rhubarb plants, which I'm not sure whether they're going to make it or not. They might have got too dry. And they might have got too dry before I transplanted them, so we'll see how those get on. There's a Brussels sprout in the middle there, and then along here I've put a row of carrots, and these are the Autumn King ones. They are just starting to come up now. I can just see one appearing there. Bed number 15 is chock-a-block full of stuff. So there are some Swedes or rutabaga at the front there. I've never been very good at growing them from seed, and I found those as small plants in the you need to rescue me section in a garden centre. They were very dry and didn't look like they were going to make it, but I thought, well, yeah, there's nothing to lose by trying. I've put them in. They've absolutely loved it here. They were about this tall when I bought them. They've just exploded into this happiness of leaf growing. The roots, the bit that I'm going to harvest, are about the size of a tennis ball already. I'm very, very, can you see how excited I am? And then in the centre there are 3 yacon plants. They're about this tall now. I'm hoping that by the time we harvest them they'll be at least this high, but they seem to be being quite happy there. In the corner here is another squash. It's a kind of acorn shaped squash, and it's called Merveille de Quatre Saisons. I think that's how you say it. So that's doing nicely. And then this rhubarb, what can I say? This rhubarb I thought had pretty much died. It's been growing in tubs for about 2.5 years now. It had got really dry, then I sat it in a bath of water and it kind of got too wet, and then it dried out again. And anyway, I've planted it. It has sprung back to life. It seems very, very happy, and this is Timperley early. So we're going to have some nice rhubarb next year by the look of that. Down here is a little red orich. It's not doing very much because every time it gets to a decent size, the pigeons come, or the magpies, one of them, and break it. This is a tomato. It's a determinate variety. I think it's probably Crimson Blush or Crimson Crush. It's doing okay. It hasn't got blight yet, although most of my neighbours have got blight in their gardens, so I'm not holding out much hope, but we'll see. And at the end here is another squash, I think, but I can't be sure. I think that's a butternut squash, and then some more chard at that end. And bed number 16, which is the second newest. I did this before I did number 14, but it's really only been here for a couple of weeks. There are pots set into the ground while I'm trying to work out what I want in here. At the back here are 4 more rhubarb plants. 3 of them are Victoria, and the one at the end there is a variety called Sutton Seedless. It's not a variety I've heard of before, so I'm looking forward to trying that. In the centre here is a perennial mallow. There is some Egyptian walking onions. These onions are the ones that I planted to collect their seeds. And here are these are ferns, and these ferns have edible fronds. Now, I'm not going to be eating them yet, and you only eat them when they first come up in spring, but I want to give these plants a couple of years to get established, and it might be that I'll need to provide them a shadier spot than this, but we'll see. There are a couple more squashes in here. There's some rosemary and some sage, and this bed just needs a little bit of time to settle in. And I don't want to go much further without saying I'm very pleased that Dave and I have started this compost-based system. I'm still waiting to find something that I can put on the roof. Really, if I can, I want to use something recycled. So I'm keeping my eyes on those sites that recycle things and sell second-hand products for some metal roofing sheets to go on there. In this video, I've been referencing putting things in the food forest. A few weeks ago, Mr. J and I took a tour of the food forest. Mr. J has joined me in the pursuit of this activity.
That sounds dangerous.
It does sound dangerous, and it's not even going to involve any work.
Oh, okay. I'm all for that.
Hooray. And that activity that's going to help your garden be so much better is to spend time in it, not working, but observing. So now we're going to do a food tourist tour together, and you kind of get to listen into our conversation, and I'll leave a link on the screen for that. So if you click just here, it'll take you straight through to that video.